everybody, it's the Warhipster here, coming at you with another Age of Sigmar painting tutorial, and today we are painting Galen and Doralia ven Denst. These are awesome models, they're very cool. More witch hunters is always a lovely thing to see, and we're going to be painting both of them in one video. So, without further ado, we're going to get into painting them, and the colours they've been primed in is Grey, Seer. Now the first thing we're going to do is work on all the red, and this is going to include her outside of cloak, so Doralia's outside of the cloak, and Galen's kind of, well, his undershirt and his trousers. So without further ado, let's get on with doing that. We'll start on Galen, and the colour we're going to make is a roughly 3 parts Blood Angels red to 1 part Cygor Brown mix. Now we're just going to go straight in with this. I'm just going to pick out these areas. So we're just going to start down here on the trousers, just picking them out. Just like that. We are going to do his undershirt, but what we're also going to do is going to use this colour on the outside of her cloak. So we're going to start around here. I'm just going to make contact with the model up here and just put it down in these lovely big broad brush strokes. So with that done, you should have a Galen and Doralia ven Denst that looks somewhat like this. So what we're going to do now is going to make a roughly 2 parts Vorbak Red to 1 part Doombull Brown mix. We're going to use this to basically relayer these red areas. So what I mean by that is we take this on our brush, and what we want to do is we want to just pick out all the areas where the shade has, well, not settled. So you just want to start layering this colour up. Over areas such as that. Little section just there. Skipping that fold in the fabric just there. And then starting again on the other side. Similarly again. Got quite a large open area here. Just want to start layering this colour up all over it. And with that done, your ven Denst, or rather ven Densts, should be looking something like this. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to we'll do it on Galen. So what we're going to do now is we're going to highlight all of our red leather, and the colour we're going to be using is Squig Orange. Now what we want to do is we want to do some very narrow highlights here, because this is going to add in our kind of light source, as it were. So what we want to do is just want to use the Squig Orange to pick out all of the sharp areas in our fabric. Just like this. And with that done, you should have some red leather that looks like this. So what we are going to do, just to brighten it up just that little stage extra, it's going to take a tiny amount of Cadian Fleshtone, and we're going to use this on the sharpest corners on that red leather. So for example on Doralia, a little bit of this Cadian Fleshtone down here, just like that. And with that done, just to blend it all together, what we're now going to do is going to make a roughly 4 parts contrast medium to 1 part Blood Angels red mix. I'm going to use this over the top of all of our red leather. This is just going to add a little bit more redness into it, as well as just putting together all of our highlights. So with that done, our red leather is now finished and it looks awesome. So what we're going to do now is going to move on. I'm going to paint in the brown leather. Now this is mostly focusing on Galen, but we do have a little bit of it on Doralia. So she's got, like, for example, her belts and things, as well as her little pack back here. That's all going to be the same color. But as I say, we want to focus mostly on him because this is going to cover the outside of his cloak and his pack and his belts and things like that. So the color we're going to be using first is Skeleton Horde. We want to take this on our brush. We just want to pick an area to start. Now I'm going to start back here on the cloak. This is going to act as our pre-shade. So we just want to get this all over all of these details that we want to be the same kind of dark brown leather. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to make a roughly 2 parts Wyldwood to 1 part Black Templar with 1 part contrast medium in there, just to help smooth it along. We're going to make this mix. I'm going to paint this all over the top of everywhere that we've just added that Skeleton Horde. So we're just going to start here on Galen's backpack. Just like this. So with that done, Galen and Doralia should be looking somewhat like this. They're looking pretty cool. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take some thinned down Gorthor Brown. I'm going to use this to highlight all of those leather details that we've just painted in. Just picking out all of the edges. So with that done, our Ven Densts should be looking somewhat like this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take some Baneblade Brown. I'm going to use this just to add a little spot highlight to our leathers, to our dark leathers. And we do this by just picking out the corners and the sharpest parts. And with that done, our dark leather is now very, very nearly finished. All that's left to do is we just want to darken down his coat just a tiny bit. And the colour that we're going to make is a roughly 3 parts contrast medium to 1 part Basilicanum Grey mix. And all we want to do is just want to very carefully paint this all over just his coat. The rest of his straps and the rest of Doralia's straps all just stay the same as they are. We just want to have a slight distinction by adding this Basilicanum Grey. All over like this. And so with that done, his coat is still drying a little bit, but that's okay because we're moving on to different details. But the dark leather is now all done. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on and we're going to paint the black leather details now. Now there's quite a few of these on each of the characters, so I recommend checking out your box art whilst we do this. So the first colour we're going to be using for this, I'm going to be doing this on Doralia, is Leviadon Blue. And this is going to act as our pre-shade for all of these areas. So we're going to start with her boots. What we want to do is just want to get this Leviadon Blue all over. And so with that done, we've now blocked out all of where our black details are going to go on our Ven Densts. So now we're going to add the black. The colour we're going to be using for that is Black Templar. So all we want to do, it's just like we did with the Leviadon Blue, just take that Black Templar on our brush and just paint it over the top of these areas. And so with that done, there's our Ven Densts looking pretty cool. So what we're going to do now is we're going to highlight that black. And the colour we're going to be using first is Russ Grey. I've got some thin down here on my palette. All I want to do is just want to start picking out the edges. Let's start with Doralia's hat. Seems like a sensible place to start. And so with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to take some Fenrisian Grey. We're going to use this to add a little spot highlight to all those Russ Grey highlights that we've just added. So for example on the hat, what we want to do is just want to add this around the kind of front. Just like that. We want to add a little bit of this Fenrisian Grey at the kind of intersection and on the corners at the top here. Just like that. So we just want to go around across all of these black details like this, and then we'll come back. And so with that done, what we're now going to do is going to colour in the inside of their jackets, but also this colour is going to be the same for some of the wood. So for example, the brazier that he's holding and the crossbow, as well as the arrows on Doralia. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Wyldwood mix, and we're going to be using this all over these details. So what we want to do is just grab that on our brush, and we just want to very carefully, because it is quite runny at this point, just want to very carefully start painting this all over these sections. And so with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to make a really thin Rakarth Flesh mix. Now what I'm talking about is you make kind of like 4 or 5 parts water to 1 part Rakarth Flesh. Just make sure that it's nice and thin and it flows off the brush nice and easily. And this is basically going to act as a little bit of a glaze to smooth out the interior of the cloaks. And that's all we need to use it on. We don't need to use this on the wood. What we want to do is we want to just get this all over here like this. We want to use this on the flat areas, just avoiding anywhere where that Wyldwood mix is really settled. Right there in that fold. So with that done, they're looking pretty good. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to quickly take some Skeleton Horde. We're going to use this on the stakes. What we want to do is we just want to avoid the tip of them. So on this big one on the back of Doralia, what we're going to do is we're going to take some Skeleton Horde. We just want to paint this over the top of the body of the stake. Just coming right up there to the tip. We'll do the same thing at the other end there as well. Just like that. Similarly, we'll do the same thing on Galen. So just down here. So this way you get this kind of slightly warmer wood that kind of fades into that Wyldwoody mixed tip. But what we're also going to do whilst we're here and we've got it, we're going to take that Skeleton Horde and use this to paint in the paper just here on his breast. Just like that. In addition, we're going to use that Skeleton Horde on the rope of the crossbow. Or rather, bowstring. It's not just rope, crossbow string. Just like this. And so with that done, what we're now going to do is going to highlight all of these areas. So the Skeleton Horde, the Wyldwood mix, all of them. I'm going to be using some Pallid Witch Flesh. Now what we want to do on the inside of the cloaks is basically just want to pick out the really sharp fold. So for example, just here. Just like that. Just gives it a bit of light for it to catch off of. Whereas for the rest of it, what we want to do, we use this Pallid Witch Flesh to pick out all of the edges. So for example, on the stake just here, I want to pick it out just like that. And so with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to use Wyldwood, and we're going to use this to paint in the wooden part of the pistol. So what we want to do is just take that Wyldwood and just very carefully around that glove paint this Wyldwood all over. So with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to colour in all of the silver on both of our Witch Hunters. And the colour we're going to be using is Iron Warriors. So this is going to include areas like their armour, the brassiere on Galen, the barrel, and the mechanical areas on the pistol, what I would recommend is that you check out the box art for any help with where to put the silver, because there's various belt buckles and stuff, but a lot of them are gold. So it's worth just checking that out to figure out where to place it. And so with that done, what we now want to do is take some thinned down Retributor Armour. I'm going to use this to colour in the remaining metallics. So we've got areas like decorative features on the sword scabbards and the swords themselves. Got some large belt buckles like the one here on her hat and the big one in the middle of her chest, just there, as well as this sword here. Let's not forget about that one. Very similarly on Galen, what we've got is we've got the icon on his chest, we've got the plate on the pistol on both sides, as well as the butt. And similarly again, we've got this large belt buckle in the middle and the sword scabbards and things like that. And with that done, we now want to shade all of our metallics using the same shade. The colour is going to be a roughly 4 parts contrast medium to 1 part black Templar. What this is going to do is it's going to make all of our gold appear nice and antique, and it's also going to make all of our Iron Warriors look nice and oily and dark. Just like that. So with that done, what we're going to do just before we highlight all of those metallics is we are just going to rattle through the last few base coats. There's only a couple left to do. And well, what we're going to do first is we're going to paint the faces. And the colour that we're going to use for this is Guilliman Flesh. And with that done, what we're then going to do is we're going to use some Volupus Pink. We're going to use this to paint in any of the wraps on the weapons, as well as the Sigmarite S. And Galen's, I don't want to call it a purity seal because it's not. Just there. Similarly here. Like so. And we've got the sword on his back as well. And so with that done, what we're then going to do is take some Basilicanum Grey. I'm going to use this to paint in Galen's hair, as well as his mustache and his eyebrows. And with that done, We then want to use some Skeleton Horde. We'll be very careful here, because it's a bit fiddly. We're going to use this to paint in Doralia's hair. On either side of her face. Just like that. And with that done, I'm then going to take some Gryph Charger Grey. I'm going to use this to paint in the fletchings of the arrows. Now, it doesn't matter if you've already covered over these with that Wyldwood mix. If anything, it just adds to the effect. And so with that done, all that's left to do is to paint in the fire in the torch. So the three colours we're going to be using for this are Iyanden Yellow, Blood Angels Red and Black Templar. The place we're going to start is by taking Iyanden Yellow on our brush. What we want to do is we just want to coat this all over our flame. Just like this. Very good. Then what we want to do is we want to take some Blood Angels Red. We want to add this whilst it's still wet over the top. Just leaving some of that Iyanden Yellow poking through. And that. You want to make sure to wash the brush each time. Because you don't want to contaminate any of your pots. Perfect. Then what we do is we wash the brush one more time and grab some Black Templar. And towards the end of the flame, you want to add this Black Templar, just coming down to around about halfway because of the amount of contrast paint on there. It just blends it out quite nicely, like so. Do that one more time on the back. There we go. Now if you want to add any more brightness into it, go back to Iyanden Yellow. And just add this in. And then next up we want to take some Black Templar. I just want to paint this over the large coal in the top. So with that done, all of our base coats are now on our Ven Denst family. So it is now time to do the last few highlights. And we're going to start with the metallics. And the colour that we're going to be using is Iron Hand Steel. I'm going to demonstrate this on Doralia, I think. What do we want to do? We just want to start picking out all of the sharp edges and all of the silver with this Iron Hand Steel. And with that Iron Hand Steel applied to all of our silver details, what we're now going to do is we're going to use some thinned down Liberator Gold. We'll use this to highlight all of our gold details. So with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to use some Flayed One Flesh. I'm going to use this to highlight the skin. And what we want to do is be very careful now, as we just pick out the sharpest details on each of their faces. So for example, we've got the ridge of his nose, got the cheek, got his cheekbone, the ear, and his eyelids. Just like this. So with that done, what we're now going to do is going to take some Wyldwood, very tiny amount, and on Galen, what we're going to do is we're just going to use this underneath his eye. Just there like that. Then we're also going to use a tiny amount of it to just block in this eye, his left eye. Like that, because that's the eye that's sort of closed whilst he aims. Similarly, what we're going to do on Doralia is going to use some Wyldwood to just block in her eyes. And next up, we're going to take a teeny tiny dot of Screaming Skull. We will drop this into Galen's right eye, our left. Just like that. And similarly on Doralia, what we want to do is we want to take a small dot of Screaming Skull. We're going to paint this on either side of the eyes. That way the Wyldwood acts as our pupil. Just like that. And with that, Doralia's face is done. So what we want to do, take a teeny tiny dot of Black Templar and just add this to Galen's right eye. Like that. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to take some Administratum Grey. I'm going to use this to highlight his eyebrows, his moustache and his hair. Just by picking out all the strands like that. And so with that done, the Ven Densts are finished. Both Galen and Doralia. So all that's left to do is their bases. Now, I'm just going to give it a generic sort of soily base. But of course, I recommend that you do these in the same style as the rest of your army. With their bases complete, Galen and Doralia ven Denst are now finished. And it is an absolute mouthful to say that quickly. Galen and Doralia ven Denst. You always expect it to be Van something, not Ven. Anyway, this was a really interesting project because trying to figure out those different kind of leather details whilst also trying to figure out a way in which to paint these two models as efficiently as possible was a really interesting challenge, particularly from a filming point of view, but also just in terms of thinking about how they go together. Quite often one of the challenges is what order to do the paints in so that you don't end up creating more work for yourself, and well, I feel like on these two we absolutely nailed it. If you enjoyed this video, you love the channel, and you'd like to support me further, like these legends and bosses that you can see on the screen before you, you can do so. Head to patreon.com/warhipster or head to ko-fi.com/warhipster. Don't forget to share it, like it, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And to make sure you stay up to date, don't forget to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon in the next one. Happy wargaming.